Good afternoon. We're live again with another of our 50 leaders in 50 days. I think it's now more like 70 days, isn't it? Interviews.
Maybe we've gone to 500 days. 50
I
leaders
think it's
in 500 days.
I mean, these interviews are just so fascinating. We just keep going and going forever. 50 interviews in forever. It's absolute pleasure to have Ross Hodges with us today. For anyone that's already watched any of these interviews, you'll know that James and I are carrying out this research as part of our book, a book that we're writing about innovation and focusing on the built environment. And it's so great to have all of these leaders and great thinkers in this space to inform our research and share insights with you as well. So Ross, over to you. Great to have you here. Could you start by giving us just a quick overview of who you are and your role?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me, Amy and James. Pleasure to be here. So yes, Ross Hodges. I work for Cushman Wakefield as a head of emerging technology and also our AI program lead. Been at Cushman Wakefield for just over 4 years now, but been in the broader commercial real estate industry for more than 15 years, both at competitors of ours and also on the software vendor side. So yeah, lots of experience, been through the churn, but yeah, excited about where things are at the moment.
Been through the churn. We are in the midst of a churn, I feel, at the moment, which we probably will touch on at some point in future discussions that we have. But in terms of Cushwake, just talk to me a little bit about, because I've talked to a few larger companies before, very global in orientation, and I always ask them about their innovation strategy, and I think that's really quite interesting from your perspective, again being a global business. So, how does innovation work at Cushman & Wakefield?
Yeah, so we started up a technology innovation function around 5 years ago now. This was very focused on like the prop tech arena, what was out there, partnering with venture capital organizations in the space and so on. And then we counteracted that with business innovation groups that were either functional or regional or country led. And then we fundamentally supported that. So originally, when in its conception back in, when it was 5 years ago now, 2018, 19, we were very regionally orientated. So when I joined the organization, I was focused on EMEA as a region. We looked at what was available there, how we could support the teams there, and then grow it. And then in 2020, we moved to a global organization because we felt that prop tech was more global in its nature. We didn't want to focus on pockets of what we could do and therefore have, 1,000 vendors doing 1,000 things to 1,000 different countries or service lines. We wanted to consolidate it somewhat. So we embarked on a journey of going global, which at the time was great timing for me because it meant that I could do more video calls during the pandemic. So there were benefits there. And then since then, we've evolved and grown. And we are becoming more inserted as part of the process. So we have a head of innovation for EMEA, who I speak to on a regular basis, understand their requirements, what are their priorities, how they're going to embark on the journey. And then I worked as a part of like the scouting and recommendation network that then goes out and finds these companies, assesses them, analyzes them, recommends them, and then comes back and partners with the business in that. And I think partnership is a really key part of it, is that sometimes in technology, we get wrapped up in the industry and we get bought into, we are technologists, we are thought leaders in this space, when absolutely we're not. So therefore, we need to partner with the people who are the experts, the people on the ground, the people who are client facing, to learn and understand what they want to achieve and then drive that forward in partnership. But we can obviously provide a curated service that links in with that. And that's really where we've driven ourselves to. And then obviously that can come in various formats, ranging from the very big, large strategic programs. I alluded to AI, through to much more. Another requirement I've got in this week was, can you go and look at robotic indoor cleaners? So it really does vary up. So, but yeah, partnership is key, and then just industry knowledge is the secondary part of that.
I'm just looking up your employee numbers. How many people people are in Cushman Wakefield?
Globally, it's somewhere between 55 and 60,000 now.
Bang on.
But that
53,000.
that really ranges obviously from, janitorial service and facilities managers and whatnot through to the brokers that we facilitate in the industry. So yeah, quite a wide range, but yes, a significant number.
And just tell me about did you call them business innovation groups?
Correct.
BIGs?
Yeah.
So how many people were involved in those originally, and how many now? And there's two narratives there. Did it sort of, when you globalized that, did that reduce the numbers, or did it increase numbers because you took it more seriously? I'm just interested in that journey, really.
I wouldn't say it increased it did increase the numbers, but not as a centralized group. So the EMEA version is still the EMEA version. It's probably been tweaked a little bit to be innovation and data versus just pure play innovation in EMEA anyway. In the US, they never really had innovation groups when we went to a global orientation. So, but what's happened over the years is that the model over there, they need to be obviously less worried about borders because it's the US and Canada. There are already a couple of borders there. They're more focused on the functional service area. So what we've ended up with is for us, like CW Services have an innovation group, our Occupier Services has an innovation group, and so on and so forth. So it's more orientated towards that, and therefore the specific outcomes of that team, rather than a blend of that, where you've got to then deal with borders as we do here in EMEA and obviously beyond in APAC.
So just summarizing that in terms of the structure and function, originally it was very much global but across function, and now it's become more global but function specific.
I would say even pretty more immature than that. It was in EMEA and APAC, they had innovation groups for the region, which was cross-function. In the US, they never really had anything. And that's really developed. And then when we as an IT function and other functions moved to a very globally orientated functional model, we pivoted into that in those areas, in the US and Canada specifically. But we also remained in the way that we were working with EMEA and APAC because it works for the type of region that we are.
Okay, so that's interesting. So just taking that in terms of the strategy that was developed, you said it's sort of been about 5 years in innovation, and obviously you've got the investments in venture funds as well.
Correct.
So were they happening about the same time? So the innovation groups and the investments were about the same time, or did one lag behind the other? And what was the overriding sort of corporate strategy from that? Because you don't just suddenly wake up on a Monday and say, I know, we're going to stick loads of money into Fifth Wall.
Yeah.
So were you involved much before that point?
So,
and if you were, how did that sort of develop?
So the investments themselves were committed before I joined the company. So I joined back in September, October 2019. Those investments had already been made. As I said, the innovation function was 2018, or late 2018, early 2019. So as a part of the inception of those groups, at the time it was known as Create Labs. That was already committed. And then in Europe, we had at the time it was called Futures, which was headed up by Richard Pickering, amongst others, which is now we've moved away from the branding of that side of things. And also we've changed our branding on the technology side. But that was all done before I joined. But yes, there was an element of that, albeit a lot of the funds were US orientated versus bleeding off the back of an EMEA requirement. So the decisions were more taken in the US about what we wanted to do there. But Create Labs, as it was at the time, was almost created to support some of those partnerships and relationships in the venture capital space.
Can I ask another question about the innovation groups? What do they spend most of their time doing? So I'm always really interested in the innovation groups, and and it always differs. So it's great to get your sort of insight into this. Do they spend time, coming up with ideas, finding solutions to existing needs, implementation? What would you say is the focus of their efforts?
I think it's twofold. So one is that idea intake and approval. So we moved away initially, obviously, when prop tech was really starting to embed itself and grow. There was a mentality of throwing things at the wall and seeing whether they stuck, which maybe didn't lead to the best outcomes and results. So what that team has tried to do is sort of be wary of the intake. So analyze what are the ideas, why do we need them, what are the measures of success, and then create a more targeted list of where we want to go after and why. So that's the first part of it. So idea intake, approvals as a queue system. The second part of it is more about business strategic change and trying to be more forward thinking and innovative about how we approach the market in any given function or region. So for our valuations business, is how we're doing our valuations business today going to lead us to grow and be successful in that space moving forward? Yes or no? If not, then how do we approach it? Is there something different? Do we target different clients? So on and so forth. So being more innovative in that way, factoring in maybe some of the outside external elements such as technology that may impact that. So I don't tend to get involved so much in more of them because they're more strategic changes to how we operate as a business. But I get very heavily involved in some of the ideas and the outputs and the requirements and what we do there.
And where do the ideas come from?
If globally, all over. Like even recently, we've launched our AI intake portal. So for all the ideas and not just ideas, but implementations of AI that we've got across the business, how people have used tools that are freely available out there, ChatGPT or whatever it may be. And even on there, we've received over 200 ideas in the last year. And it's completely global. It's open to everyone to submit. And then we have to triage off the back of it. So yeah, really no holds barred. Like it can come from everyone at any seniority. We take every idea seriously, and then try to support them. It could be, educational support, learning and development and growing them in their skill set through data literacy or wherever it may be. Or it can be, supporting them at an enterprise and delivering on their requirement, but making it more scalable. It might be a great idea coming out of Poland. Actually, could you take that idea and apply it across other countries, other regions? And then how do you support them with that and credit them with some of those initial ideas?
Do you have a sort of standard approach for assessing the value of an idea?
Yeah, so we've tried to come up with a mechanism for doing that. Now, each technology group needs a different methodology applied to it. I think you can always take the 2x2, complexity against value as a very simplistic heat map to do an initial assessment. And then you need to look at the technology groups itself and themselves and work out how you then need to identify that. So if I use AI as an example, you look at the feasibility. Can it be achieved? What are the ethical and legal guidelines you need to work with? What's the cost and the measurements of success against it? Does it return an ROI? Does it, reduce, improve efficiency in different areas? Does it align with strategic values? Now, every company will have multiple goals that they set as an organization strategically that they want to achieve. We're no different. We have 4 key strategic pillars. How does that use case align to those? And is it going to be a great differentiation? So we tend to apply those type of rule sets across how we define use cases and score them and then triage and prioritize them accordingly.
Sounds great. And final question, and then sorry, hogging questions. Has anything come across your desk in recent months that you are particularly excited about? Maybe you can't talk about the really exciting one.
No, I mean probably, and this is more an enterprise level than probably individual prop tech, but like I've managed to get my hands on Copilot, from Microsoft, and like it will be a game changer to everyday lives, as it were, in the working world. You know, going into a meeting, having your meeting notes written up for you, lists of actions, putting them into a to-do list, you know, managing your calendar, writing a presentation off the back of a Word document or a set of emails. It's been pretty exciting in that front. But I think more broadly, just there's several other products and solutions out there that are showing good momentum in the area around how we support our business and our clients. But you have to be mindful and careful of, especially with AI and generative AI specifically, some of the regulatory and legal challenges that may come. So whilst they're very exciting, someone who is a technologist and loves everything future, I have to put my my somber hat on a little bit more sometimes to dampen my enthusiasm.
What a shame.
Which is a shame, but it's understandable given the speed of advancement.
Yeah.
Well, and also the global nature of your role, right? Because again, you said it. You know, what could be acceptable in Poland is definitely not acceptable in France. So that's the other caveat you've got, because you can only really move as fast as the slowest regulation. So
exactly. You know, the EU tends to be quite forward in terms of legislations. Like the EU AI Act is obviously now going through some of its final stages of approvals, but you know, America's they've released an executive order, but that's no regulatory requirement at the moment. That probably almost won't likely come along until after the elections this year. So there's things you have to consider as you push and move forward, and how you try and comply. And from us internally, that comes back to the partnership angle again. How do we partner with our privacy and data security teams? How do we partner with our legal teams, and so on and so forth, to ensure that we're giving the best service and we're protecting our clients?
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally appreciate that position. It's not an easy one to balance. A couple of things you picked up on. Firstly, you used one of my favorite words, triage. I think triage just sounds like it's just a cool sounding word. Love that.
Unless someone's telling you that you're in a hospital and you need to be triaged.
Yeah.
There's the caveat. A couple of things from I suppose a few things that you said. And I'm going to go back in reverse, because I think the last one actually pivots into my main question. You mentioned 4 strategic pillars. What are the strategic pillars that you guys have got? If that's publicly allowed information, I don't mind if you haven't got that.
Yep. So that is operational excellence. I don't think that these won't come as a surprise to anyone. So operational excellence. How do we best operate as an organisation and bring all of those benefits to our clients? Client experience. How do we ensure we're delivering the best service to our clients, including the data and the technology and whatnot? High performance culture. So how do we enable our talent across the organisation to ensure that we got the best talent, but we're also building a career path for those individuals within our organisation in the industry? And then data and analytics. These are all ones that I believe they're all out there on the public realm. So how do we ensure that we're utilizing data, we're getting new data? And that's where some of the technology angles really come in. If we can get more data, we can do more with that data to provide a better service again. So yeah, they're the 4 pillars. And so from a technology standpoint, we always try and go against those principles when we look at any form of technology.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's actually interesting. Data analytics is such a high strategic value there. That's quite it's quite telling of where it's all going. Other thing, you mentioned you have a head of innovation. In this case, you said APAC. I'm just interested because we had another interview. I think it was it might have been Dean Hopkins, ex Oxford, who said that he disagreed with the sentiment of having a head of innovation, because it meant that all innovation went to the innovation person and then it was off their desk. Have you got a view on that personally? Not obviously professionally, but personally, because I understand that theory, which is if strategically everybody should be thinking about, and bearing in mind what you said about your 4 strategic pillars, it's about upskilling and making everyone think. do you feel that an innovation role, let's say, means that it stops at that person and it prevents other people thinking about it, or not? I'm just interested.
Not in our experience, but I think that's because those of us who are in the innovation roles have tried to ensure a democratized nature. We may be setting a strategic goal. What is the goal of this year around innovation? Is it to do more citizen development? Is it to focus on a given technology category or an area? Is it to ensure that we're looking at new opportunities in the broader company's goals for change? You need a leader to facilitate some of those conversations. But what we then have is very much a democratized nature of people to be and enabling them to come forward, get upskilled, approach those leaders around what the opportunities are for them as individuals or as a broader team. So whilst I agree with certain principles on that, I think it's also up to that leader to ensure that it's not the case and you're not seen as a single point of failure or success. And you actually do allow yourselves to just be a head of a group fundamentally that enables innovation across the organization.
Amy, just carry on for a second if you wouldn't mind. I've just got a couple of things I've just got to sort out. One sec.
No problem.
Thanks, James. So one of the things that you talked about, the second point that you talked about when we talked about the innovation business units, you talked about strategic change. And I guess big part of that is the ability to see around the corner that we all know is really challenging.
Yes.
Predicting the futures, without a crystal ball, that's pretty impossible. How do you do that? How do you guys think about the future, and what do you see coming in 5, 10, 20 years?
How do we do it? I think it's just it's having a good network, and it's doing a lot of research, and so I'll probably talk from two angles. So you got the general trend of where the commercial real estate industry is going and the changes that may impact that, and then you've got outside forces which will influence it. So those outside influences are technology, as an example, is the way that I would think about it personally. And how do we therefore take what is coming as a wave or as a trend and seeing what the impact of that is on our industry and how proactive we need to be in that space. So that is just the best way I can say that is networking and understanding and research. It's not just being you can't put yourself in a box of the commercial real estate industry and just focus on the commercial real estate industry. You need to have a much wider understanding of the influences and where the industry is going from a technology point of view, and then be able to do the translation work to talk about how the impact of that is going to affect the commercial real estate industry.
I think that's a really interesting point. What other industries are you particularly sort of aware of and focusing on?
Financial, I think that's probably the big one, because that went through the change curve, 5 to 10 years before where we are now, where commercial real estate is as a change with technology. Healthcare is another one I tend to follow. So there's a couple of examples there, but I think there's things that will come out of those that will impact us. So, healthcare, how do we make our hospitals better or our living care better? Ultimately, they're still buildings. So therefore, how do we think about it, and how do we implement some of those changes? I think a good example is a sensor. There was a sensor company, I think it's Xander Cardian, who originally they were there to check on fundamentally whether someone had a heartbeat whilst they were sitting in a bed within a hospital.
Yeah.
The sensor they were using, which hung on a ceiling, just picked up heartbeat and could alert people if that changed or whatever it may be. They've then taken that into a footfall tracking and monitoring solution to then say, actually, we don't. If we can track heartbeat, that means we can track footfall, and so on and so forth. So there are some synergies that have occurred historically. That's just a single use case, but it's that have taken from healthcare, and then you can probably take examples from the financial sector as well.
There's a similar one there, though. I mean, Amy, we were interviewing somebody from the government property agency yesterday, Don Brankin, and he was. We were doing the interview, and the lights turned off. And it's like, all that sort of funny stuff.
The arms, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, and it made me remind the fact that obviously nowadays that there is a more advanced version which is actually goes on body heat, not on movement.
Yes.
And so what you're saying there is it's a similar use case. I'm going to apologise because as Amy knows, I've now taken over a new role which will be announced in a couple of weeks, and I'm now getting used to working in an office environment again where you got to sort of share. You've actually got to share things. So that was an example of technology not working because I've booked this little, I don't even know what it is. It's almost like a garden shed.
Yeah.
And I said to this lady very kindly, said, no, I've booked this. And she was like, I've booked it. And I was like, well, no, you haven't. She had actually booked it. It was a duplicate.
You won, though.
I won. Well, I'm here. Isn't it? Possession is 9/10 of the law. So I am in possession of my shed. So look, moving this on a little bit in terms of the sort of strategic stuff, because I'm interested in the sort of the investment side and corporate investment. If I'm not mistaken, you guys have obviously got a few sort of investment angles. I think Metaprop, obviously Fifth Wall.
Yeah.
How it may be. So I'm interested in it from what benefits you see now from those sorts of relationships, and I'm wondering. No, I'm going to let you answer that first. How do those relationships work, and do they help you in the role of sort of technology lead?
Yeah, so I think the original impetus going into it was much more strategic. They were seen as thought leaders around what is happening in the industry. We can take some of their research and partner with them in terms of telling them about our challenges and understandings, and then very much be collaborative and face up to some of those challenges. What's happened in the corresponding years is that we internally have built up our own expertise and groups within the organization, which means there's probably less reliance on them now. We still have the relationship because there's still credible value in what those organizations bring. They still are a pulse on the market. We're quite a small team. They're a very large team. They see changes from their other LPs. We get to hear about those changes and can work with them on how we can potentially resolve and move forward with them. So I think the perspective has changed over time, from them being truly strategic, getting involved in strategic programs and projects, facilitating the needs and requirements, into being more of a advisor, whereby we are bringing more of the firmed up and thought through ideas to them, and then them acting with us around what are their other LPs doing, and what they're seeing in the market, and actually then also recommendation who are the organizations in their portfolio that we could work with against those requirements. And then naturally, obviously, from being in the fund, you obviously get the benefits of that side of things anyway.
I find it fascinating, this, because the more people I speak to who've invested in funds, I never, literally never hear them say, because we expected a return out of that fund.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard one person ever say that.
No, and I think that's okay. I think sometimes there's more value in your logo going onto their list of LPs than there is, and getting, like, for me, the absolute thing is networking again. Like, I get to meet, thought leaders, peers in the market, so on and so forth. I don't look for it as a return.
I suppose it's not your. I don't mean this in the flippant way, but it's not your money. So
no,
for you as an individual is the wider network.
Correct.
So I would love, and I haven't managed to do this yet with you, Ames, is actually speak to, the top tier C-suite, who are the ones that make that decision to invest, and hear if they are expecting that return. Because if they're not if they're putting it in, and for a fifth wall investment, which is very late stage, I would expect there to be an element of we should see a return on this.
Yeah.
Whereas in earlier stage, like your Metaprops and your Pi Labs and all of those sort of early stage funds, they're probably not expecting a huge return, if anything.
Yeah,
and they're looking at the advisor.
I think there's different perspectives in the org, but the investment, it'd be good to get that perspective, because would be very different from mine. Like, I have a monthly meeting with them where we talk about our priorities and so on. That team doesn't tend to have that. They would have like a yearly check-in, and probably just to check in, as you said, on the financial numbers and whatnot. So it'd be there's definitely different perspectives.
Fascinating. It's the most expensive networking I've ever seen in my life. I think.
This is more an observation than a question, really. I really like that you keep talking about networking. You've mentioned it at least 3 or 4 times. I've made notes. And the reason I like it is because there's so much evidence, isn't there, that one of the strongest predictors of innovative success is the team's ability to network.
Yeah.
And yet so many people who are sort of in an innovation role just keep their heads down and do their own work.
Yeah.
But you have to broaden your horizons, and you can only really do that by networking outside of the business as well as inside the business.
Yeah, I mean, like even yesterday, there's a research piece that we're doing with a university at the moment. We're the only commercial real estate provider within that research piece. There's people from insurance, from healthcare, from various other sporting backgrounds, even to a certain extent. So it's good just to hear what other people's perspectives are, and then you can take, like, a process is a process. The process for innovation probably won't change industry to industry. So you almost get validation of your own process. Also, then do learn from those alternatives in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be the seed of a new idea, or sometimes the end of one, but that's all. This information is important, it's vital.
Just going to go back onto that strategy around the investment bit. Obviously 5 years on, and given your role in that sort of technology lead side, do you see Cushman sort of doing more around the when you're looking at build, buy, invest, partner, etc., etc.? Where's the sort of strategic value in each of them, and where do you feel Cushman have been and perhaps are looking to go in the future?
So where we are at the moment, so actually in 2021 we pivoted a little bit. So where we were previously doing the VC funds and establishing more and more dollars into those funds, we took a pause decision and looked at the true value and maybe whether we wanted to change. We then started doing more direct investments in that realm. I think what we've learned in the time that we've been doing direct investments, and we've got 12 or 13 organizations in the list since 2021, is you need to be doing it in partnership with the business. Me investing in a prop tech company, no matter how good they are or how great the product is, or where they see themselves going in the future, is that if you make that investment, it needs to be done with sponsors, support, advocacy from the business in order to make it a success. If you don't have any of those, you're fundamentally flogging a dead horse. And I think that is the biggest changes that we've seen. There's a better understanding of the value now of what PropTech can bring, but there's also a traditional mindset of I didn't come along the journey with you, therefore I'm not going to fully endorse what you have as a technologist have brought. So there's that. We are trying to do much more of a mix of the build versus buy. Historically we've been less build, but maybe with the ability of some of the newer tool sets, you're able to do more build because you can shorten the time frame or reduce the amount of resources you need to build. But we're still very much looking on the buy. We're still leaning on our strategic partners and vendors around what they're doing and leveraging. But once again, we're becoming less reliant on them and being more open to what else is out there because of this. And once again, this all comes down to, and I think you alluded to earlier on, James, the speed of change that is occurring within the market. So I think that's sort of dictating where we are going. But once again, some key factors, Amy, as we've alluded to already, like the partnerships, doing it in partnership with the business and the SMEs and the experts, having them involved at the earliest stage possible, being less fixated on an outcome or how you're going to deliver it. There's some of the key things that we're trying to move forward with.
Can I ask a question about mindset, since you've touched on it? I mean, obviously, most people are aware of the key kind of mindset attributes that people need to innovate, but is that changing? Because given the speed of change, would you say that the kinds of mindsets that you're looking for in people who are going to actually be able to take these innovations and take the right innovations through to fruition, what do you need? What kind of personality factors do you think you need?
I think there's two parts to that question as I see it. So it's the mindset of willingness to change. And I think we've come a long way within the real estate industry around the willingness to change around technology. I saw a few posts on LinkedIn this week about people talking about we need to move away from the mindset of this is the way it used to be. Like we've moved past that now. Like even some of the conferences I went to last year were still focused on what I would call relatively basic elements that we have gone beyond. We as leaders in the technology side of things are maybe still attached to and talking about. The industry has changed. People are now starting to see what that change means to them in their roles and what it can have an impact on. So that's the biggest thing, is that we've gone through a period of change. We're now actually starting to scale that change. And then the second part of it is just openness, but willingness to change. So even people, I'm speaking to like a very senior broker in the US, and we're trialing an AI product with them. Within the first 5 minutes, because of the way that we framed the discussion, he was like, I'm on board. I want to do this. Let's move forward. So it's just
the broker's just going, well, I'll tell you what, if it's going to help me sell, then I'm in.
And that's the fundamental thing. So like this one example was that they asked them to give a real life scenario in a demo. So they said, give me a name, any name you want. They threw out a name. It was someone they've been trying to approach and contact recently. They used a piece of AI technology to understand that person, what makes them tick, generate an email that produced content, reached it out to them automatically, and then got a response, which they'd never previously been able to get. So within literally a half an hour demo, they'd achieved something they weren't able to achieve, but through the use of technology. So I think it's mentality-wise, it's that openness, but also from us as technologists, it's willing to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve for that person and speak to them in that tone and that manner. There's some of the things that we've learned over the last few years.
So your sense then is that, so in the past, adoption was always a big issue, wasn't it, with any innovation? Yes. So you could have the most brilliant, in theory, innovation, but people didn't use it because there was a failure to adopt. Is your sense then that that's changing, that people are adapting and adopting new technologies more easily now?
Yeah. As a general consensus, yes, naturally you always face challenges with individuals, around the world. But as a general consensus, there is much more of a willingness. I think if we talk about AI, like it's a general technology, like anyone can go and use it and see instant gratification around the use of it. So what that then has done, if I focus very much in AI as a use case on this, is when ChatGPT launched, individuals, because it was in the news or it might have been one of their clients or whatever it may be, went on there and asked it a random question and got a response back that gratified them in what what meant with the technology, and then they started spinning ideas of what it meant to them. So it's because of these general technologies versus out of reach things that they maybe didn't fully understand or grasp is changing in the mentality of the general populace within the industry.
Yeah. Maybe this is a question that you can't answer, but so the sense is that we're adapting and adopting new technologies more easily, maybe because we're generally getting more comfortable with constant changes in that space. Are non-technological innovations still more difficult then? I guess that in many cases, non-technical innovations just feel like change, and change is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think non-tech innovations are probably more a potential. I mean, I think the gap is closing on the impact. I think those bigger changes, maybe it's strategic direction, maybe it's the hierarchy, maybe it's resourcing, maybe it's something else, have always been bigger things that have a general impact. And maybe technology didn't have as great one, but I do think that gap is shortening, whereby technology is now becoming as big an impact as some of those larger strategic plays. But it's going to be change, and it will be, it'll be interesting that as we start to hear this year around where the priorities sit around the leaders within the industry. Are they seeing that gap shortening themselves, and where does their messaging go when they come out with some of their 2024 plans?
Is there anything that sort of consistently frustrates you about innovation and trying to get innovations off the ground? Do you have any frustrations?
Real estate brokers.
I have lots of frustrations, but I think it's just and this falls on both sides. It's understanding. So like from the startups world, it's understanding what it means to work with an enterprise and some of the loops that we have to go, or the hoops we have to go through in order to make it work and deploy it. And then on our side, it's that speed of change and how do we change that in order to meet in the middle somewhere. So like legal is a prime example. Like if I took what I spent on legal last year, and every minute and dollar that I could make a dollar out of or a pound out of, that I would have been a very rich man by the end of last year. It's just like, how do we overcome some of those challenges to make things more quick? Make a decision more quickly, get something going, improve the value of it, and then almost circle back and do something more thorough. They're things that I'm having conversations with all the time on. And then, as you said, it's sitting down with people and understanding people, but trying to learn and do that is sometimes a frustrating exercise as you move forward. But yes, I think let's call it general bureaucracy of being inside a large corporate enterprise and then having to manage expectations on the external side as to what it means on that. And often we get approached by companies who have they showcase brand logos on their websites, but actually when you go to work with them, it's almost like they've never worked with a large corporate before. And they're like, here's a contract, can you sign it? No. Like, I need to go and get legal to sign it off. You need to go through an infosec process. Like, there's some of the frustrating things. So it's relationship on the external, getting them to understand what it means to work with us, and then us, obviously, the bureaucratic element and maybe how we can expedite some of that process.
I'm going to just come in on one aspect, which I think is quite challenging for some. I'm very conscious of your time, Ross, so I don't want to spend too much more time with you. But previously, you filled in a small little survey for us, and it was talking about the biggest benefit of having a decent technological strategy. So this is more on tech than it is on anything else. but then you also talked about the biggest barrier to adoption. And you actually, I don't know if you remember, you answered the same thing, which is ROI. So the biggest benefit is ROI, but the biggest barrier to that adoption is also ROI. And I just wanted to explore that a little bit and where you were going with that.
So I think sometimes proving the value of something is very difficult when it's so new. So if, for example, we find a new piece of technology that we want to deploy, we believe there will or may be value in it, but we just don't know yet because we need to experiment with it or wherever it may be. That, you know, as soon as you approach anyone around that subject, they're like, well, if you can't prove instant value, there's no point in moving forward with it. Now that value may come in 2 years or 3 years because it is so new, versus obviously something where you can instantly prove the value of it. There's instant win and instant reward around that. So that was the perspective I was trying to give on it, really. It's mentalities are changing around that. Like now I have my own budget to go off and pilot and trial and test new technology. Obviously I still have to do the due diligence and evidence-based approach, but there's now much more of a willingness to trial and prove and do things versus maybe what there was a few years ago.
And is your main focus at the moment around that sort of AI initiative that you talked about earlier on? So you're in the AI program?
Very, very much so. Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're still exploring non-AI stuff, let's call it, albeit, you know, everything seems to come with a component of AI these days. You know, you speak to a sensor provider and they're like, we've got AI in now. Could I utilize my budget, which is probably being more augmented towards AI for something like that? To be debated, but it's yeah, it's probably going to be used more in that space this year.
Interesting. Ames, you got anything to finish off before we unshackle Ross from the interview that we have?
I guess just how a final question. Like to end on a nice, tricky final question. What's the vision? What would you love to see changing in your industry in the near to long future?
I see, Ames. You do that with a smile, and therefore it doesn't seem as a tricky question. I mean, that's
a hard question.
I can do that with a smile. That's the problem.
Yeah, that is a hard question.
That is a hard.
What I'd love to see change. Look, we're on the cusp of significant change with technology globally. If you read all the articles, the research papers, and everything around generative AI, it's all showing and promising, you know, if you read the doomsday stuff, the end of the world, but like significant changes on the workforce. And therefore being in an industry whereby we are reliant on the workforce because we deal with the assets that they then potentially go and occupy or lease or buy. So I think, what would I like to see change? I think everyone having more of an understanding around where the future is going and what the impact of it could be, but then also bringing a level of realism to that. You know, as I said, even on the broader set of research papers, you get different polarizing opinions. How we as an industry need to really focus on what it means to us and therefore react accordingly. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, or maybe I dodged it a little bit.
It was a difficult question, and it was an excellent answer, Ross. Thank you. We're seeking some consensus across the industry.
Yeah, and there will also be, and I think maybe closer collaboration. Like at the end of the day, we're all in this together. There will be things within the industry that are going to have a fundamental change. How do we collaborate more closely as an industry to provide, you know, governance around some of these technologies that are going to have an impact?
That's such an important point. I mean, we know that when the chips are down, so if, you know, the mining disaster in Chile in 2010, the chips are down, 33 lives at stake. People came together from across the world to collaborate to come up with an innovative solution.
Yeah.
We know our instinct when the chips are down is that collaboration is the key, but we also have an instinct to keep things to ourselves. And that is the overriding thing that happens
Indeed,
on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, if we could change
especially
that,
in the broker world as well.
Yeah, it's
very, very competitive.
It's natural, isn't it? It's natural human instinct to want to be in an in-group and keep that information within your in-group. But actually, when things get really serious, then we know that we have to collaborate.
Yep.
I think that's a nice way to end. It's been a pleasure.
I am going to end the stream.
Thank you
publicly,
so much, Ross.
Thanks so much, Ross.